Hey there, guys. This is Paying back again with a bit more black and white informational analysis stuff. So something I've had a bit of a request for. Well, first and foremost, I'll plug two things. The first thing is that I've just done a video over on the ADV Revival Tournaments YouTube channel. So this is a YouTube channel that does like commentary of big ADV tournaments. The guys that ran that, it's a guy called Gold Mason. He wanted to do some content about Black and White Invitational, and so asked myself and Finchnator and Luck Over Skill and a handful of other experienced people to do some commentary on that. So I've done a brief video over there, talking about kind of the concepts in this video too, doing some commentary and some games from that tournament. The second thing is I've just also done a podcast with Meesum and Cow over on Meesum's channel, which I'll link. I don't know what we're calling that. I don't know how many we'll do, but we've just found it funny. The idea of like just getting some of the British players together and just sort of shooting the shit and maybe interview some like other black and white players. So I will sort of link those across as and when they pop up. But yeah, do check out both of those. I think they were both decent. That brings us on to this video then. Something that I've mentioned briefly in both those two previous videos, the kind of invitational commentary and then the podcast stuff, was Hail in Black and White OU. So this is something that seems to kind of be on trends. I would not say it's like metagame dominant. It's not everywhere. You're not seeing Soulwind take souls with this. It's still quite niche, but it's this idea that like we're beginning to see an uptick in kind of high profense teams that have their own weather control. We've kind of seen that with some like Tranitar and Scarf Drill type high profense things. And then we also see this now with like these Abomasnow high profenses. So it feels like a misnomer to really call them Hail offense, because really they're just like Abomasnow offense. But the idea is as follows. Hail is like a really potent weather condition. It's possibly actually the most broken when you look at what it does. Like, yeah, Hail without competition is really really strong. And it is also decent to like some of the other weathers too. Like it's got an inherently good like rain matchup. But the idea that you like, okay, ignore the blizzard stuff, ignore like stall rain, ignore all that sort of thing. The fact it just chips like everything across the board except for ice types is like really really good in a tier that's become balanced around steels and grounds being really important defensive pieces. So the fact that they actually don't recover in hail is kind of the entire use case for using it. The blizzard stuff is also kind of relevant, but not hugely. And so basically, what people have been doing and working out how to like build hyper offenses that abuse hail chip. And these two teams, between myself and a black and white community member called Brian, kind of give examples of that. So this is we're both using like offensive trick room Reuniclus, which is a mon that you kind of find hard to fit onto hyper offense sometimes, but it's really potent. I think naturally pairs quite well with Hail. So I'm not going to show this game just because I don't want to like reveal all the sets and shit, but just to kind of give a brief intro there. So the idea of Hail is to kind of chip grounds and steel types, and then abuse that with things like offensive psychics, and offensive dragons, and the occasional offensive water, maybe. So yeah, I'll just talk through some of that. So the original Black and White Hail, I would say, is this one. This is a team that Dice brought to SPL now 2 or 3 years ago. It originally had Cloister in this slot, right? But Cloister's now banned. So the idea behind it is basically to use Cloister, Volcarona, and Dragonite are probably 3 of these scariest late game set sweepers. An issue they all have is like Rain, Scarf, Keldeo, and like various rain stuff, like opposing Starmie and things like that. These all kind of don't really do shit against. And so like on a normal team, you'd maybe run like Breloom here and you'd kind of get away with it, but you're playing against like opposing rain. And yeah, it would work, but it probably wouldn't be amazing. And Dice had the idea to actually swap out what would be the other offensive grass type and put in a Bomber Snow instead. The idea behind a Bomber being that, you get Hail that supports Cloister. Cloister's for like one of the very few Hail immune offensive Pokemon. It's the only Hail immune spinner, I guess. And Cloister really appreciates like Steel's being chipped, so does Dragonite as well. And that's kind of how the team's meant to function. So this would be like Spin Cloister. Nowadays, you'd have to use Spin Starmie, obviously, but that's kind of like basically how the team is built. So you've got like good hazard prevention from the combination of your spinner and also like this lead Landorus T that he used. But yeah, I think this sort of structure is still how things are. You're still going Abomasnow, Stealth Rock, ground type normally, spinner generally Starmie, Jirachi because Jirachi is the best Hail Steel by an absolute mile. This slot will be like an offensive Pokemon that kind of lures Tyranitar normally, so that like Abomasnow can get uncontested Hail later in the game. And then here you have like your big late game sweeper, which you also want to be like a Hail Abuser, which will be generally a Dragon or a Psychic or something. So yeah, this was kind of like the starting point. But now let's kind of talk about through how things have changed and the kind of the various things that you can do with it now. So first and foremost, Abomasnow set. So starting point for the team. I don't think you really you don't pick the Abomasnow set first necessarily, but I'll just talk through it because it's the obvious thing to start with. The obvious set we had for Abomasnow to begin with was Focus Sash, and the reason being that it's hyper offense. You've probably got Dragonite or Volcarona, so you're going to have like good hazard control, and so Focus Sash Abomasnow is just like a really good starting point, right? It's you're pretty much guaranteed to get one attack off because you're Hail immune, and that lets you trade with some like favorable things. So things like even like Heatran can't like beat you. You trade with Keldeo, which is huge. You trade with like Terrakion, Scizor, and things. It just makes Abomasnow kind of hard to remove. This is the set that Dice originally used, and I do also think you can actually drop Sash here and go Hidden Power Fire. Sorry, do what am I talking about? You can do Expert Belt for the extra damage output, which I think is also fine. But this is kind of like the obvious set. Maybe you drop Earthquake or HP 5 for like Ice Shard. That's also doable. Something I've seen people do a bit as well is use Focus Punch here. And the reason for that is that although Abomasnow is really good into Politoed, one of the annoying things is when like Politoed comes in and then they might pivot through to their Ferrothorn on Rain, and you can't really hit that if your coverage is like Hidden Power Fire in Rain, and your Blizzard is also like nerfed and 70% accurate and shit. So Focus Punch is a really cool way to like punish the Politoed switch out, and it also hits T-Tar really hard without like self-KOing through Woodhammer. So I think Focus Punch is pretty interesting, but generally you'll be Earthquake and HP Fire here most of the time. The other set that Abomasnow can use, and I kind of got turned on to this, and I used this myself in Invitational this year and really enjoy using it, and that is Choice Specs Abomasnow. So one of Abomasnow's biggest strengths is its stab combination of ice and grass, and the reason for that is that throughout Pokemon history, like your ice resist tends to be steels, but it just so happens that in black and white, all the like the decent steel types are, they're actually ice neutral. So, Excadrill, Ferrothorn, and Skarmory being like the really big ones, and then stuff like Jirachi and Scizor also around, but like a bit more niche in terms of how they're used defensively. But really, Drill, Ferro, Skarm all being ice neutral. Is huge, and then the other thing is that like waters also resist ice, but they're obviously going to be Giga Drain weak. So the strength is really in its stab combination, and so just slapping specs on it and actually is going to town with Blizzard, knowing that no one's going to go into water, really to take a Giga Drain. Basically like Abomasnow's biggest strength is its 2-move coverage. But when you put specs on it, you kind of just get away with Blizzard pretty easily, and the freeze chance also just makes even some of the sturdier switch-ins like actually really bad switch-ins. The real upset to specs is the damage on Clefable. So you've got like a 90 something percent chance to 2 KO Clef, which is really, really big because otherwise Clef kind of just sits on you a little bit. It's just about bulky enough on both sides to kind of take like Blizzard and Woodhammer. So yeah, this set's really, really decent. And what it does is it kind of lets you get away with like not using another offensive ice type to abuse hail offensively. So like a lot of the other offensive ices are hard to fit alongside each other. Things like, you know, Specs Kieran is kind of hard to get on teams, so just running Specs and Abomasnow kind of lets you get away with not needing it. Another set I've just thought to include now as well is that I'm trying to work with is Substitute. So like I just said, one of the big things about Abomasnow is it's really hard to switch into, but it's slow. So if you do ever get the decision wrong between Blizzard and your Grass stab, it can kind of be like good night for you. So like subsets I think have like really big potential. Like the number of times that people try and like pivot out from try and get their Gliscor out to go into like a Keldeo or something on Blizzard, and you just get the turn wrong. It's like huge. So I think sub actually has a lot of potential. I'm not fully sure what slots you go for here, but something like this feels like it would be kind of intuitive. I don't know. Yet to really test this, but I think you probably could do this. But basically, yeah, that's Abomasnow for offensive teams. There's obviously like the stall sets, which are, you know, way fatter. So these go with a spread like something like this, I think. Gives you the bulk to, actually really 248 because your Rock's weak, but this gives you the bulk to live Keldeo Secret Sword, and also that's Keldeo Secret Sword from full, and also a Latios Draco Meteor after Rocks, if I remember right. And these support runs go like Protect Lefties, you know, Blizzard, Giga, and then either Seeds or Shard in the last slot is what you do here. But generally, like, if we're talking offense, you want your Abomasnow to be like a progress maker. So you want to go for like big upside sets with like big coverage or huge power or whatever this is, you know? So that's kind of how our bomber works. In terms of abusers, so the stuff you want to use alongside Abomasnow. The first one is like offensive dragon types. So here's some examples of that. So you got obviously DD Dragonite, something like Latios, SD Garchomp, or maybe even like Scarf Garchomp, also really decent here, or like Scarf Salamence. Reason behind this, as I covered loads before, is Hail's chipping steel types. So something like Fire Punch Dragonite is really hard for Skarmory to deal with in Hail. Having the fire coverage and having the Hail switch off Rain means you can just beat through Ferrothorn, which is really, really big. So yeah, these are kind of like the obvious pairings for Abomasnow, I think. Like you probably are going to have dragons you're going to have dragons basically. So the dragons do a couple things. Firstly, they're good win cons that synergize well with Hail offensively. The second thing is dragon defensive typing is actually really, really good. So Latios brings in Keldeo checking, which is big. If Keldeo ever gets in on Abomasnow, obviously it's got that kind of nasty fighting weakness. Latios is like a natural check to that. Dragonite and Mence are really big because they check Volcarona and also Keldeo too, but Volk is big. Abomasnow is probably going to be giving Volcarona setup, so having something like a lefties Dragonite or a Scarf Mence is really good here. So yeah, these are the really obvious options to go alongside Hail. You'd pick 2 or 3 of these, but there are other options. So the other options would be like offensive Psychics. So Latios here again, obviously same reason before. But yeah, Alakazam, Reuniclus massively benefit from Hail Chip on Skarmory and Scizor and Jirachi and all that stuff. Arguably on Gliscor as well. So some Alakazam sets and Reuniclus sets actually have issues getting past Gliscor if they drop HP Ice. So like a Hidden Power Fire Alakazam, for example, like really hates Gliscor. So yeah, this kind of synergizes well as well. And the other thing it does is that if T-Tar is always being pressured to come in and like reset the weather, that means it's taking damage, and that all builds towards Alakazam and Reuniclus in the end game. So I think these are quite potent too. I'm yet to find a good Alakazam 6, but I've got a Reuniclus one that's decent. But yeah, these three also pair really well offensively with Hail. I'll delete these so I can show the lower ones. The next one is offensive water types. And for here, there's really two. The first one's Starmie. So as I mentioned, Starmie fits on these teams anyway because of Rapid Spin. It's the best offensive spinner in the tier. You can run Natural Cure, or you can run Analytic. It doesn't hugely matter, I don't think. But Starmie and Gyarados are both really badly walled by Ferrothorn. So having constant Ferrothorn chip plays massively into the hands of like offensive Starmie and also something like a DD Gyarados. And Gyarados also has that like it's quite similar to Dragonite, and it's got that same sort of typing that helps it to check Volcarona and Keldeo, with the added benefit of it also checks like Heatran. So Starmie's really easy to fit onto these teams. It's really, really good. You can run Hidden Power Fire here if you really want to take advantage of Ferrothorn, and also Starmie is like a half decent Scizor check, which these teams need. Gyarados does that too, obviously. So yeah, Starmie is easy to fit. Gyarados is actually quite hard to fit, but it is doable. I think Ashoka's got some teams with this. Yeah, you can probably use sub here as well, because you are Scald resistant. I've not really done the calcs, but I imagine in Hail you can probably actually take some of the weaker Scalds and have the sub survive, but yeah, I've not really calced it. So yeah, Starmie's a good one. Gyarados is kind of a theoretical win condition for Hail, but I still think kind of unproven. The next one is the offensive ice types. So this would seem obvious. It would seem like these... It's weird that this isn't the first thing that you mentioned, but the ice types are actually really hard to fit on Hail alongside Abomasnow, to the point that like most of my teams actually don't have a second ice type. Generally, they are like kind of slow-ish, or they don't have a huge amount of utility, or their defensive typing is just like really suspicious, or their rock's weak. There's like a lot of issues with a lot of them, but I will talk through them. Mamoswine's decent, and the reason Mamoswine is decent is Hail teams are unlikely to have their own Pursuit, and their own steel types get nerfed by Hail, and that means that opposing Latios can be really, really difficult. So having like an emergency button in like Mamoswine Ice Shard can be really, really good. What also makes Mamoswine good is access to Stealth Rock, which these teams obviously need, and there's not like a massive availability of like good rockers for these teams. When things like you don't really want to use Gliscor. Lando you can use, but it's a bit like do nothing sometimes. It kind of like free spikes for Skarmory and stuff, so you don't really want to do that. So Mamoswine is good for Shard and Stealth Rock, as well as like it breaks through things like Skarmory a lot easier in Hail. The other ones are like the Kyurem forms. So by far the one I've seen most success with is this sub freeze shock set with Power Herb. The real upside of this is that a lot of high preference teams kind of hate like Thunderwave Clefable and kind of hate like Rotom Wash, and Kieran Black having access to like 404 subs is like really good for like status resistance on a team, on an archetype that typically finds it hard to get in like status immunes. So Kieran Black ends up being like your Scald Abuser and your Clef Abuser and your like Rotom Abuser and stuff by having this fast sub that's like S-Toss resistant and stuff like that. Also beats Jellicent, which is big. So the idea that you sub and then you've got this really powerful one-turn free shock through Power Herb. This set's really decent. The other thing Kieran Black can do on Hail is Choice Scarf. Has the option to go mixed with Hail Blizzards, which is really decent. Quite like this one. Again, this pairs more into like the dragon part rather than the ice part. Like Kieran Black is functionally like barely an offensive ice type in the way it plays. It's more of a dragon. But yeah, these ones I probably wouldn't ever use choice bands, and the reason for that is that choice band is always just going to be a Latios invitation, and you kind of want to limit those on Hail teams because you don't have good steel types on Hail. So yeah, you kind of need to be thinking about Latios matchups. So yeah, CB Kieran Black, I'm not a huge fan of. Kind of following on from the highest, like choice specs regular Kieran is the same story. So it's doable if only because specs Blizzard is like crazy powerful, like 2-hit KOs, Blissey kind of powerful. But it's got the same sort of limitation in that once it kills something, it's slower than most other wall breakers, and therefore you have like a sack and a return. And yeah, Latios is the big one there. Like your teams are not going to have good Latio switch in, so Pokemon that knowingly give Latios a free opening after every kill are like pretty rough. Um, the last one I want to mention here is Weavile, and this is something I've not really tested with yet, but I think has some potential, if only because it's probably the easiest way to get like Pursuit into some of these teams. You can play it like a mid ground between like a Mamoswine and a Scarf Tar or like a Scizor or something. You have Choice by Night Shard, and you've got Pursuit, and you've got Beat Up for Alakazam. Those are all good traits to have. It's faster than Latios, so you can like choice band, pursuit it, and stuff like that. I think it has potential. It's hard to use. It needs pivots, and these teams find it hard to get slow pivots. They can use like U-turn Jirachi, but it's kind of difficult to get Weavile in consistently. But yeah, I think this mon can be used. Not really sure how you do it yet, though. So that's the ice types. I think that's all the ice types. Would I use anything else? No, I would use nothing else. That's all the ices. The last one is a weird one, and it's offensive fighting types. Again, I've not fully tested this, but I know people who have and have come back and said it's good. So the first one is Conk. Conk is seeing a bit of an uptick on hyper offense teams. The idea is that you always pair it with like Healing Wish stuff. So there's not tons of Healing Wish users, but you'd use it with like Jirachi and Latias, both with Healing Wish. So Conk is really good at trading with stuff. So it can like 1v1 just about like so many things in the tier, but it'll always like almost die in the process of doing it. So then you just Healing Wish and bring it back. And if you do that twice, there's not many teams that can beat Conk 3 times. It's really, really powerful. One of Conk's issues, though, is that it's got a headache between like picking Payback and picking Ice Punch on some of its sets. So you want Payback for like Jellicent and for Uniclus, but you want Ice Punch for the ground types like Gliscor and Landorus T. So the idea here is that if you've actually just got Hail Chip to wear down those ground types, you don't need Ice Punch. You can just use Payback and just Drain Punch them, which I think works really nicely. I've seen this being used in Tour, and it seems decent. Conk is just kind of hard to support, but I think this has a use case for sure. Other good thing about Conk is that it's the closest thing the tier has to like a 100% safe T-Tar switch in, which is obviously big for Hail as well. The next one's Terrakion. This is kind of theoretical for me. I've not fully thought it through, but the idea being that Terrakion is like, in Hail, if Landorus T and Gliscor are getting like perma-chipped, and things even like physically defensive Skarmory, just having this guy be able to click moves and like the Lando can't recover them seems like decently strong. It maybe solve some defensive holes for Hail, but you need pivots with it, and it's just kind of hard. This may be unviable, but there may be like one team that you could do this with. So that kind of covers all like the offensive directions you may want to go. So it's dragons, psychics, ice types, fighting types, and maybe Gyarados. Maybe Gyarados are the main ones. For the next thing, let's talk about glues. So the number one glue for these teams is going to be Jirachi. So I think there's 2 ways you can go with Jirachi on these. The first one is Lefty Stealth Rock. What that does is it lets you use your ground type more offensively. So it lets you go with something like a Scarf Garchomp, or it lets your Mamoswine be like 4 attacks with superpower rather than trying to first stealth rock in. And there's big upsides doing that. So this set is decent, and it recovers with lefties, or at least it offsets hail, and it's got a slow U-turn pivot. You'd use this with like reduced speed IVs probably. This is decent. 5 punches your way to beat Sizzle. And yeah, this is fine. This is absolutely fine. What will happen more often is that you'll have your ground type be your rocker, and you'll use Choice Scarf Jirachi. And the reason for that is like Healing Wish with your sweepers is really, really powerful, and Jirachi's also, especially Scarf Jirachi, is really strong against Alakazam, especially like the Life Orb Zams that we see at the minute. So yeah, you'll see a lot of these teams running Scarf Jirachi. I think you can theoretically use Sizzle, but it's just harder. And the reason it's harder is just because like the speed tier of Scarf Sizzle is not as good, and it kind of makes it a bit harder to use it as like a support Scarfer. And it's not really got like the Trick and Healing Wish utility. But yeah, I think you can use Sizzle. Maybe like some kind of Roost Sizzle might work too. Something I'm experimenting with right now is very similar to Jirachi, very similar to this Jirachi in particular, is Metagross. So I mentioned earlier, Hail teams have an issue with finding Pursuit, and that makes them quite weak into Latios. But something like specially defensive Metagross, or even like offensive Metagross, I think has some potential. You can use like Shuka here maybe if you wanted. And yeah, this thing's probably okay. I've not really got any good teams with it yet, but I think you can probably do this. It's a decent rocker. It's got Pursuit, and then it's kind of like it breaks through things like Ferrothorn and Landorus T easier in Hail than it would do otherwise. So I think this probably has some potential. Yeah, I think it's fine, maybe. Starmie is your big glue guy for like spin. I've been through this a million times. Almost all Hails will have Starmie, but the ones that don't will have Drill. Drill's kind of rough in Hail because, it's like got really good defensive typing, being like a steel, but it's not immune, and it's kind of slow, and you probably want to put rocks on it, but Rock's Drill is like kind of dire because it never sets up rocks against the other rockers and things. It's just kind of, it's a bit bleh, really. But if you're not running Starmie, this is probably the only other viable option you've got to get a spinner onto the team. And I think, yeah, this is probably okay. Again, I think Shoka has some teams with this. That's probably most of the glue guys there that I can think of. I'll put Scizor in just for now, but I've not really seen a good Scizor Hail so far. You'd probably do Scarf, honestly. If it was me, something like, and then your last move can be anything, like Bug Bite, let's say. Yeah, these are the guys that are, not necessarily abusing Hail, but kind of plug holes and round your team out at the end to make sure they are secure. So with that done, let's take a look at some teams that I think are like decent Hail sixes. So if I delete this one, what I've got is this team from Cow. Again, this used to be a Cloyster team. It's now a Starmie team. You can see here that my kind of formula for Hail follows a core of... This looks really boring, but you'll see the stats in a second. These 3 glues are always kind of the same. So I always rate Latios on offense like really highly, especially when you want to get T-Tyra out of the way, but also just because it's so strong into Keldeo and Thundurus, as well as being like good speed control for like opposing Garchomp and things. Even like Breloom and stuff like that. I really rate Latios highly on basically every kind of offense. So I try and squeeze Latios in wherever I can, especially now we've discovered like Colbur Berry sets, which evade T-Tar easier. Either way, this is an old Cow team back from when Cloyster was in the tier. The idea is to use Stealth Rock Rachi as like your glue, and then you've got 2 wall breaking dragons in Hidden Power Fire Latios for steel types, and then Freeze Shock Kieran Black for like generic bulky stuff. And you hope that these 2 breakers will open the way up for Choice Scarf Garchomp, and that's kind of the idea behind the team works. The Abomasnow here I think is Focus Sash set with like, the generic kind of Woodhammer, Earthquake, Hidden Power Fire stuff. I'm a big fan of Ice Shard in these, but these are all fine. The next obvious direction to go is like DD Knight as the last Pokemon. And so here, what you're going to do is use kind of the same defensive core. Latios helps to lure in the steel types again, and Hin Power Fire them. I quite like Choice Specs Abomasnow here. The entry point it gets off of like Scarf Jirachi is really big. Like Scarf Jirachi tends to lure in stuff like Ferrothorn, or some of the ground types. And so you just get like free Abomasnow Blizzards off of those. And here I've got Stealth from Mamoswine for like more pressure on Skarmory. So this one is like decent. You'll see this one being used in Tour like a decent amount. Maybe not with Specs Abomasnow, but this might be like the most solid 6 going around at the minute. Not necessarily my version, but like a lot of people have come up with this 6 kind of independently. But I think the 6 is really potent. And then the last one is the one from the kind of the video right at the very beginning, and this is using offensive Trick Room Reuniclus. The idea being that here Latios is now not only luring Skarmory, but it's also luring T-Tar, so that Reuniclus goes in with Life Orb Trick Room in the end. And also you've got the option of like quiet Abomasnow in Trick Room. If Reuniclus ever goes down, you get like 2 or 3 turns of just Specs Blizzard off of, how slow is this? Yeah, off of like 110 speed basically. So yeah, this one's decent as well. So yeah, that's kind of my Hail video. I think that covers everything. Like I said, there's more ideas to explore here. I think Weavile stuff has potential. I think Gyarados stuff has potential. I think Conk stuff has potential. And I've not seen like an optimal version of any of those so far. So if this inspires you, do go and get Building Hail. I think it's really interesting. Not the best thing in the world. I'm not trying to sell it as like the big thing in the tier right now, but I do think it is an interesting style of offense that we should be seeing a good amount of. With that, thanks very much, everyone. Hopefully not too long until my next video.